So let me ask you this, based on everything that we just finished talking about, right? That they were, I mean, your job, your livelihood was on the line, right? We just talked about how certain jobs were telling people, hey, if you don't get jabbed, you're out of here, right? There were certain places like New York City where you had to actually show an ID, a Vax ID, to get into a restaurant to eat food. If not, you weren't allowed in. I mean, I know that being vaccinated is not one of the discriminatory attributes, but my gosh, based on what we saw, it really needs to be. And if I were, a political congressman, I would absolutely be vowing for, hey, we can't go through this again. You can't keep discriminating on people's whether they're vaxxed or unvaxxed. I would make that, I would put that attribute somewhere and say that's part of now the discrimination factor.
You hit the nail right in the head with a hammer, Carlos. I mean, for them to ask for papers, I mean, this is like going backwards in history. Well, which we all know what happened in Germany. Show me the papers, Jew. Show me the papers. I mean, literally so discriminatory, absolutely insane how the left and its minions, some of them, not everybody, went along with this fraud. I mean, this is a scam on a global scale, on a national scale. So how didn't people see that this is leaning into very, very dangerous zone of discrimination? We're not going to serve you food if you're not jabbed. We're going to make you a sub-level, lower class citizen if you haven't gotten the untested and experimental jab. We all know that. And Carlos, absolutely crazy how the majority of these blue states, these leftist Marxist states like New York, California, Illinois, just to name a few, went along with this farce. I mean, discriminating on their own citizens, treating them like another subclass. I mean, when have we seen this? When have we seen this that in the name of health, we're going to violate your HIPAA rights by asking you if you had a job or not? That's not the problem of a restaurant host. That's not the problem of a museum host to let you in or not. Get out of here. Come on, people.
Yep, you're absolutely right. Now, based on everything that we talked about, do you feel like this entire movement was political?
Most definitely. I strongly believe that this movement was driven by the left, by the Democrats. Again, the Democrats were the ones pushing for lockdowns, pushing for draconian masks, for curfews. This was a political movement, and the people that you saw on the street wearing masks in the daylight, running in nature with masks, or riding a bicycle with masks, or being at the beach in the water with masks, or at a pool, we know, who these people voted for. I mean, it's obvious. You feel sad for them because at the end of the day, they're the one that making themselves a clown. With this clown world showcase. But yeah, I strongly believe this was a political move by the left to punish us and the entire country for what happened in the 2020 elections, and even before that. This was an action to punish the entire nation, in my opinion, and the world. And again, obviously, their minions in the left went along happily with it because most of them are Marxists and they want control.
I'm going to challenge you a little bit. I don't think it was based on what 2020 was. I think it was based on the fact that they just wanted to get to Donald Trump. Everything that he said that they would do the absolute opposite. I'll give you a good example. Let's take a look at this article. In our first example here, we're looking at an article where President Trump had put a travel ban on China, right? For people coming from China over to the United States. Now that seems like common sense. Hey, that's where ground zero is. People are coming and we really don't know the transmissibility. We don't know carrying. We don't know incubation. We don't know any of that stuff right now. So, hey, let's go ahead and stop all of that stuff. And what did the left do? They attacked them for being xenophobic, right? They went after him and after him and after him. And then you've got Pelosi in New York City saying, we're celebrating the Chinese virus. Come on, or the Chinese New Year. Come on out. There is no virus. We're not going to placate to xenophobia and so on and so forth. And Andrew Cuomo and many other prominent Democrats did the exact same thing. So instead of taking a bit of caution and concern, no, they wanted to play politics and make it seem like Trump was the racist because, of course, that's the easy card that they got.
Most certainly, Carlos. I mean, those points were right on target. For them to have the hypocrisy of, hey, let's criticize, President Trump on the ban. Obviously, it's common sense. And these people, again, if Trump said that the sky was blue, which it is, and they would have said the sky was a red, or purple. So this is all happening. The extreme that they go. And let's check out the video for sure.
No, keep going. Finish your thought. I just wanted to prep it.
Thank you. No, I mean, it's absolutely disgusting. And then how Nancy Pelosi, said, no, just go out in Chinatown and celebrate. And in New York, they have videos literally saying hug a nation. Like, I mean, absolutely insane what the clown world, Carlos, and for them to move the goalposts and then say, protect yourself, get the jab, wear the draconian mask, or how I call it, the face diaper. Absolutely ridiculous.
But let's take it from a different angle, because that's again that's their go-to playbook, is to call somebody a racist, especially Donald Trump, which was. Actually, it's anybody that's white, that's on the right. You call them a racist, right? But let me ask you this, just to give the audience an example. If, let's say, the virus had came out of Venezuela, let's say, and Trump called it the Venezuelan virus, would you get offended by that? Would you say, oh my gosh, that's racist?
No, not at all, Carlos. I mean, that's what we call common sense nowadays, which I know now, since the Marxists are changing what's normal, they're making it unnormal and vice versa, and they're normalizing the insanity, their agenda and their insanity. No, I mean, it's completely right. It came from China. We know that. Why don't we call it the China virus or the China flu? I agree.
I mean, we had the Spanish flu. I'm not offended. You're not offended, right?
I mean, no.
I mean, it's so ridiculous. But let's go ahead and let's put to the test where the hypocrisy is here with this China virus, right? They accused Trump of being a racist because he kept calling it the China virus. But let's see how the media handled that name.
This is all happening at a time that we're starting to see a message shift here, because you're starting to hear the Republicans, especially Trump calling it the Wuhan or the Chinese coronavirus. They're looking for someone to blame.
Concern is growing this morning over an outbreak of a new SARS-like virus in China. At least 6 people have died from the Wuhan coronavirus. The Wuhan coronavirus. The Wuhan coronavirus.
The 34-year-old ophthalmologist diagnosed Saturday with the Wuhan coronavirus.
Wuhan virus.
The Wuhan coronavirus.
The Wuhan coronavirus. What more can you tell us about the similarities or differences between SARS and the Wuhan coronavirus?
The Wuhan coronavirus.
The Wuhan coronavirus in China.
The Wuhan coronavirus.
The Wuhan coronavirus.
From the Wuhan coronavirus.
Wuhan coronavirus.
Fears continue to grow over the outbreak of the Wuhan coronavirus.
Wuhan coronavirus.
The Wuhan coronavirus. The Wuhan coronavirus. We have new information about how the Wuhan coronavirus is spread.
Tying coronavirus to China and Chinese people isn't just a racist dog whistle. It's a whole racist orchestra. It's a mighty, mighty racist bass tone.
I hear Stephen Miller.
We'll leave it right there because you get the idea, right?
Most definitely. I mean, these people are on the left. They're so such hypocrites. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous how they were calling it first what Trump called it all along, and then when he said it, then they revert back to no, it's racist, and don't call it that, and be a xenophobe. I mean, it's absolutely disgusting, Carlos. I mean, I'm not sure how these people live with themselves.
Yeah, it really is. It's unbelievable, the hypocrisy. It's unbelievable how, they twist things. And the problem is not the fact that they do, because that's not the shocker part. As far as the political rivalry, what's sad is the journalists, right? The journalists, right? Because again, like I've said in previous episodes, if these people are purposely lying to you, if these people are purposely doing this manipulation, it's not journalism, it's propaganda. And it works, unfortunately, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but it's just the reality of the weak-minded. Because when you look at the comparisons, you hear Trump saying Wuhan or China virus, and if you get offended by that or you get ticked off because the media told you to get ticked off, I'm sorry, you're kind of weak-minded. They did the Jedi mind trick on you.
Most definitely, Carlos. I mean, it's absolutely pathetic, in my opinion, their approach to go back and forth on issues and call this racist or not that. I mean, people see through it. I mean, obviously, they have their half or less of half of the country that supports them. People that, again, not to be mean, but it's a reality, that are not awake. They go with this woke Marxist agenda, and they're cheap, in my opinion. That's why people that are awake are lions. They're not cheap. So that's what we are, brother.
Yep. Let's go ahead now and keeping on with the politics behind here. Let me ask you this. If I like me personally, when Trump was doing the vaccine and he was doing I think he was calling it warp speed, right?
Correct.
Okay. I had no intentions of taking the vaccine at all, right? I didn't matter who made it. I don't trust the government. To me, that's way too fast for anything to go through. And to be honest with you, I'm perfectly healthy based on the stuff that I was seeing, based on the the symptoms and the results. My only concern was how would it affect my asthma. But because I got it before the vaccines came out, and really I had really minimal. I think I had a 99.3 fever. It lasted 3 hours, and then my sense of taste was gone for like about 2 or 3 weeks or something like that. That was about it. So I'm like, well, I don't need anything. I'm perfectly fine. My immune system handled it perfectly. I mean, I've had worse flus than what I got with C19. But the politics behind it, if it's that serious, remember there were prominent Democrats that were saying they would not take the vaccine if Trump made it, right? But then when they got into power, when Trump was out, and they got suddenly they got to take it, and everybody else has to take it. And if you don't take it, like we said, you're going to lose your job. You can't come and eat. You can't live your life, etc. So let's watch a quick video.
So let's just say there's a vaccine that is approved and even distributed before the election. Would you get it?
Well, I think that's going to be an issue for all of us.
If and when the vaccine comes. And it's not likely to go through all the tests that needs to be and the trials that are needed to be done.
When we finally do, God willing, get a vaccine, who's going to take the shot? Who's going to take the shot? You can be the first one to say, sign me up. They now say it's okay.
And the question of whether it's real when it's there, that requires enormous transparency. You got to make all of it available to other experts across the nation so they can look and see. So there's consensus, this is a safe vaccine. If the president announced tomorrow we have a vaccine, would you take it? Only if it was completely transparent that other experts in the country could look at it. Only if we knew all of what went into it. If Donald Trump can't give answers and the administration can't give answers to these three questions, the American people should not have confidence.
But if Donald Trump tells us that we should take it, I'm not taking it.
All right. So, like we mentioned, right, you can see right here that they went ahead and you had Kamala Harris, you had Joe Biden, you had a lot of members on the Democratic side. They were talking about they're not going to take the jab, that it's going to take a while. Who's going to trust that information? And is it going to get vetted and so on and so forth? Wow, they sound like a lot like us when they made us do it, right?
Most definitely. I mean, it shows their hypocrisy, Carlos. I mean, I literally had, colleagues at that moment that are, they're good people, obviously, but, they're part of the left. The left is cold, in my opinion. And they go ahead and when Trump created it and everything, through with his team, War Speed, they were criticizing it. And literally when Biden and Kamala also, cackling Kamala, said that, no, we're not going to take it. If it comes from Trump, don't trust anything that comes from Trump. They were literally saying that. But then it flipped. Joe Biden got into power, quote unquote, and then they went ahead and took the jab because, senile pedophile Biden told him to. So, I mean, it's absolutely incredible how these people, they don't have ownership with their own decisions in their lives. They need to be told by big government, on what to do. It's basically, it's, like taking an approach of, hey, government, govern me harder, government. I mean, come on, people. I mean, absolutely. The hypocrisy at a major level, Carlos.
And then moving on, we've got the flip-flop, the constant flip-flop that the Democrats love to do. They're very famous for it, right? They flipped on a number of things. They flipped on gay marriages. They flipped on abortion, where it should be rare and not often, right? They flipped on immigration, right? Illegal immigration, that is. So they flipped on a number of things. So here's a video of Joe Biden saying that he was not going to mandate people, and we obviously know that's not true.
For all Americans.
Sure. I don't think it should be mandatory. I wouldn't demand to be mandatory, but I would do everything in my power. Just like I don't think masks have to be made mandatory nationwide.
He also acknowledged the...
Not only did he say that he wouldn't make vaccines mandatory, but he wouldn't make masks mandatory either. And obviously he changed. Now his defenders are going to come out and say, well, the science changed. No, the science didn't change. The politics changed.
Exactly, Carlos. I mean, it's absolutely disgusting how, how all creepy Biden, went back and forth on this issue by lying, like he usually does, to the American people and to the world by saying that, no, we're not going to mandate. And then, that's exactly what he did. So, it shows their hypocrisy, their lack of authority and leadership. To be lying back and forth like that, I mean, that makes him even weaker on his quote-unquote administration. It just shows how they are. They're just pretty much like the leaders in Venezuela and Cuba.
Yep. Other examples that we have to show the politics behind this was the fact that they shut down small businesses while keeping big businesses open. I mean, Walmart stayed open, Publix stayed open. Walmart I think is nationwide, but Publix I think is specific down here to Florida. They kept a lot of these big businesses. Amazon's stocks and their profits went sky high during the COVID. So they squeezed down the little guy, shut down the little guy, and left the big guy going. And remember, Democrats always say that they're for the little guy. Yeah, okay. Like we mentioned before, they prevented gatherings while supporting the riots of 2020. Dr. Fauci was asked if COVID was a concern during the riots, but I think the First Amendment, freedom of speech, is very important. So I'm not really going to weigh in on COVID at that point, right? The hypocrisy of that, and it wasn't protests, there were riots, they were looting, they were burning down buildings, and we covered that in our fake news segment. So those are a couple of examples. So do you have any other examples that you have of politics being played here?
Yeah, and definitely, and just piggybacking of your last point. Yeah, he didn't want to touch the protests, the riots basically of the criminal George Floyd. But then again, he did criticize a bike week in Florida. He did criticize that because obviously we know who bike week typically attendants are. They're typically people on the right. They're Trump supporters. Then that he criticized it and called it outrageous for them to meet in bike week. So it just goes to show you, which you already know, Carlos, but to the audience, the hypocrisy by this leftist bureaucrat, little elf. But another example, it's basically calling DeSantis as DeSantis while supporting Andrew Cuomo. I mean, this was so political, Carlos, that somebody that didn't see this political agenda, I mean, I'm not sure what they were drinking or smoking, but it was evident from the get-go.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, to compare the two states, and the thing was is the media started to compare because of the differences, the different outcomes that each state was having, right? New York was basically locked down, and their numbers kept on rising, while DeSantis, after a few months, I think it was like 2 or 3 months, he was like, that's it, we're done. We're done listening to the elf. We're done listening to this guy. He's getting things wrong. He keeps flip-flopping. We're going to go by the actual science. So he reopened Florida, and Florida thrived. And what was happening was that the media was focused. They were hyper-focusing on just one thing, and it was the death count and completely ignoring the death count of Andrew Cuomo and calling DeSantis Death Santis and so on and so forth. Well, who's where now? 2 years later, where's Andrew Cuomo and where's Ron DeSantis, right? Where are the people moving to? Are they moving from Florida to New York, or are they moving from New York to Florida?
Exactly, Carlos. I mean, just going back to your point, while Andrew Cuomo was putting, elderly or infected patients in elderly homes, basically killing, in my opinion, some of these elderly people by putting them in danger. They didn't criticize him at all, but they wanted to criticize the savage because he did open Florida. I was actively going to the beach a lot around that time, and I met great people, fellow U.S. citizens from states that were locked down, and they were telling me how happy they were to have freedom, to go to the beach. I met people from California, from New York, from Illinois. They were thrilled and happy to be here in the MAGA state of Florida, where freedom lies.
Yep.
So, I'm basically moving on to the next point, Carlos, and audience. The Democratic hypocrisy on mass mandates was evident. I mean, we saw Gavin Newsom in California, which I call Comifornia, because of their draconian communist takeover over there. I mean, I feel bad. I have a lot of friends that live there, and it has become a hellhole, unfortunately, to live in California. High taxes, high crime, illegal anti-constitutional mandates that violate human rights and North American rights. I mean, you could go on and on. But anyways, you saw Gavin Newsom eating at fancy French restaurants in California, no mask, while everything was locked down, and he was mandating his constituency in California to wear masks even outside. He was like a king, not wearing it. That just shows a hypocrisy. You have Nancy Pelosi in failed San Francisco, where she locked everything down, thanks to Gavin Newsom, of course. Everything was shut down, but then again, she was getting a hairdo. She was at the hair salon, not wearing a mask either. And Dianne Feinstein, remind me about Dianne Feinstein, and Carlos, what was that example about?
Dianne Feinstein was seen maskless at an airport.
Oh my God! Oh yeah, I remember her. Yeah, well, everybody wearing the face diapers. She was not wearing it. Thank you for reminding me. And last but not least, this is just a few of many. AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I was in South Beach in December of 2021, and she was also seen in South Beach. I didn't get to see her, Carlos and ladies and gentlemen. I was proactively walking around Ocean Drive and Washington Avenue trying to see if I could see her and kindly and respectfully have a conversation with her about her hypocrisy, while she had her constituency locked down in cold New York, mandating them to take jabs, to wear the draconian diaper face. She was in South Beach in the hot weather, sipping drinks with her cuckold husband. It was absolutely unbelievable to see that and to know that. Even though she called DeSantis Death Santis and she called Florida a death state, she was here celebrating New Year's. I mean, tell me your view on that, Carlos.
I mean, utter hypocrisy. Like I was saying, there's too many examples to put on here, but these are just a handful. There are others. I mean, I remember there being I don't know if it was a G2 summit or whatnot. The leaders all got together, and in front of cameras, everybody had masks. And then when the camera stopped rolling, everybody took off their mask, and they were all hugging and shaking hands. And it's a circus, it's a clown show, and the left loves to remember rules for thee and not for me type of thing, right? And
Exactly.
So it's just disgusting. Moving on to our next example of the politicization of C-19. It came very early on when China had stopped flights in and out of Wuhan, but they went against the fact that Trump had his travel ban. They jumped on the xenophobia train, and they talked about how this could strain relationships between the two countries and so on and so forth. I'm like, wait a minute. So you are okay with stopping. Actually, it wasn't even flights into Wuhan, if I recall correctly. It was just flights, domestic flights had been temporarily shut down, but they wanted the international ones. So I'm like, wait a minute, that's fishy to me. Why do you want the domestic ones to stop for yourself, but the international ones to keep going while you know there's an outbreak happening? That was kind of fishy for me, but whatever. The last one that I want to point to, or the second to last, I think, no, second to last, is Dr. Birx, and this is just recently. She came out and kind of admitted, or it seemed like she admitted that the vaccines, they knew that they weren't going to protect anybody. Let's watch that, and I want to get your opinion on that, Saul.
Oh, definitely.
Here we go. Let's do, this one has a video. So Dr. Birx says she knew COVID vaccines would not protect against infection. Let's see what she has to say.
Well, if you're across the South and you're in the middle of this wave, what's going to save you right now is Paxlovid. But once we get through this wave, during the lull, you should get vaccinated and boosted, because we do believe it will protect you, particularly if you're over 70. I knew these vaccines were not going to protect against infection, and I think we overplayed the vaccines, and it made people then worry that it's not going to protect against severe disease and hospitalization. It will, but let's be very clear. 50% of the people who died from the Omicron surge were older, vaccinated. So that's why I'm saying, even if you're vaccinated and boosted, if you're unvaccinated right now, the key is testing and Paxlovid. It's effective. It's a great antiviral. And really, that is what's going to save your lives right now if you're over 70, which if you look at the hospitalizations are rising steadily with new admissions, particularly in those over 70. And so if you live in the South, I know people keep talking about the fall. I'm worried about the South. I'm worried about rural America and our tribal nations that just don't have access to testing and a primary physician like the president does. And I hope coming out of college.
So let me stop right there. Let me ask you this, Saul, because it almost seemed like it almost seemed like she slipped, because she's contradicting herself. She's telling people to get vaccinated, but then she's saying that we knew that the vaccines were not going to protect against the infection. So was she talking about the original variant or the original virus, and now she's telling people now these vaccines are better? I'm confused based off of that.
Carlos, I'm confused too, just like the rest of the country and the world. I mean, how is an individual like this not in jail right now, not in an orange suit? I'm sure that hopefully, God willingly, that will come at some point. But for her to literally say that we overplayed the vaccine, I mean, her role at that moment was to try to save as many lives as possible. As a main physician, along Fauci the fraud, to have a confident approach at that moment, and millions of people follow your lead on that moment. So for you to come out and say, just nonchalant, yeah, we knew the vaccine, the jab wouldn't work, but we went along and we overplayed it. I mean, that should be criminal right there, in my opinion, Carlos, an audience. I'm not a lawyer. We all know that. I'm not an expert, but that should be like Nuremberg Code, crimes against humanity type of trial. I don't know. I'm just saying an idea. But you know what's happening, Carlos? They're starting to feel the heat about what's coming to them. They're starting to jump ship. Let's
not jump ahead. I know where you're going with that. Let's not jump ahead. Let's go a little. Let's wait for that because that's the powerful end to end, right? So let's wait on that one. Let's go to the next part where Fauci actually throws China under the bus, surprisingly. So here, I remember at the beginning of our episode, we showed Fauci praising China for its transparency, and obviously it didn't happen, right? So he comes out and now he throws them under the bus. He throws his paycheck under the bus, essentially.
Joining me now, Dr. Anthony Fauci, Director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and a member of the White House Coronavirus Task Force. So let's just start in January or February. When was the first time that you realized that this was a major problem? Because I remember in late January, you were telling people, early February, this was nothing to be concerned for most Americans. Americans, for the most part, were not at risk.
It was in January at a time when the Chinese were saying first that it was only going from an animal to a human, and then when there were human cases that looked like they were transmitted, that it was very inefficiently transmitted. It was at that time in, I believe, mid-January that we made the statement that if in fact that's true, that this is mostly animal to human, and we're not in China and it's very inefficiently spread, that in fact it may not be something that is of a major threat outside of China. When it became clear that not only is it transmitted efficiently from human to human, but that it was very, very contagious in the sense of easily transmittable, and it also had a high degree of morbidity and mortality. At that point, it became very clear that we were in for a problem because we were getting travel cases from China, and even though we cut off the Chinese pretty quickly, once it's seeded in this country, then it does what any highly transmissible virus does.
Right.
So there's nothing inconsistent with the information we had.
So number one, oh my gosh, a communist country lied to you. Big surprise there, right?
Big surprise. Even though he was praising them at the moment and saying that they were being transparent. I mean, it goes back and forth, Carlos.
And then his final statement is the kicker, and this is what really ticks off Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, if I'm not mistaken. He says, and I'm quoting, "There is nothing inconsistent with the information we had." I think we've proven that case that's incorrect in this episode. You said we didn't have to worry about it, and we did have to worry about it. You said that they were being transparent. No, they weren't. You said we didn't have to wear masks, and then you forced us to wear masks. Then you made us take a vaccine, which one of your doctors said you knew it wasn't going to help or anything like that. So I think that there's a lot of inconsistency here. And Mr. Dr. Fauci, I hope one day the truth finally gets and catches up to you and justice is served, my friend.
Amen. Amen to that. That's a great Italian/New Yorker accent.
Dude, I'm like, this guy is really... You know what? You and I, we know because you and I have, I mean, you're my brother-in-law. We spent the last, 2-3 years together and so on and so forth. And the frustration, that we've had to endure. We've seen fellow Americans lose their jobs. We've seen actual family members pass away. We've seen so many different things. And this guy's getting 6 figures plus. He's getting books. He's getting deals. He's on CNN all the time, and
over magazines. Mm-hmm.
Dude, I mean, oh man, I share in DeSantis's expression when he said we need to grab the elf and throw him across the Potomac.
Exactly. Amen. Amen to that.
So here's some troublesome origins. Tucker Carlson had a Chinese virologist on his show, and this was quite compelling because this Chinese virologist really came out, and she's no friend of the Chinese communist government, right? She's actually talking against it. And based on her testimony, now she's an actual virologist, she's an expert here. She has declared, and to her findings, that this virus was actually man-made. Now, we're running a risk saying that this video could get deleted, but we're not the ones saying that. That's the Chinese expert virologist saying it. So let's watch that one. All right. Chinese virologist. China's government intentionally, quote unquote, released COVID-19. I worked in the WHO reference lab, which is top coronavirus lab in the world, she says. Virologist whistleblower says COVID-19 was intentionally created. This is a 6-minute video. Let's see what we can hear from this and see what we can get.
And we're going to do that again right now. Li Mengyan is the virologist who says she has evidence about where this pandemic actually came from. We're happy to have her on tonight. Doctor, thanks so much for coming on.
Hi, Tucker. Hi, Tucker. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that you've published some of your research. You're planning on publishing more soon. Give us, for a non-scientific audience, a summary of why you believe this virus came from a lab in Wuhan, please.
Okay, briefly, from my first report, I can present the solid scientific evidence to our audience that this virus, COVID-19 SARS-CoV-2 virus, actually is not from nature. It is a man-made virus created in the lab based on the China military discovered and owned the very unique bat coronavirus, which cannot affect people, but after the modification, becomes a very harmful virus at now.
So I'm going to pause it right there because it's long. So Saul, here we have Chinese virologist coming on, and she's basically saying, I have proof, I have evidence. It's been modified to be infectious towards people. And so here's what normal science would have done. Normal science would have said, okay, let me see your data, let me see your research, let me see the points that you're making, let me see your data, essentially. And let me validate that information to see if it's true or not. But that's not what happened. Everybody on the left, whether they were political leaders, whether they were doctors, scientists, tech gurus, whatever, they shut anybody down that questioned it. They called this lady crazy, and they said she was a threat to human society for passing misinformation and all this other garbage. That's not how science works. You're allowed to question science because science is not 100% accurate all the time. You need to test your theory and look at the results and see if the results, and over multiple test trials, see if the results hold. And when there's scrutiny, you look at that scrutiny, you test that scrutiny, and you compare it to see if it's applicable or not. And that's not what happened here.
Most certainly, Carlos. I mean, science, as we all know, the premise of science, it's trial and error, experiments. You have to ask questions. And like you said, if all those trials continue to give you a similar or exact result, then you can assume, a more driven result, a more accurate result. So for her to come out and say this, and actually back then, she disappeared for some time, if I'm not mistaken, after that interview with Tucker Carlson. So very scary. I mean, that just shows you how the Chi-Coms, take this approach of not letting the truth out, just like the Marxists in big social media here in the United States are also following suit, unfortunately. It goes to show you, Carlos, that, a lot of us are and were right when we question this virus. It seems like it was man-made. Who knows, maybe it was thrown out there to affect the discrepancy of the Trump second term and affect the election. Maybe China wanted to get back at the USA because of Trump's rightfully changes on international, imports and exports on trade. Many questions are in the air. So great video, Carlos.
Absolutely. And here's my opinion on it, based on the question that you just finished asking. No, number one, was it intentional? I believe it was. And I believe it was intentional and with the partnership of the Democratic leadership. Why? Let's think about this logically. Let's get rid of politics. Let's get rid of left and right, and let's just think about this logically. If you've got a virus coming into your country, and it's a threat, you see we had videos what was happening in China, how the Chinese government were grabbing people and throwing them into locker rooms and so on and so forth, and into cars to take them away because we saw it, and the social medias they took it down. So if I'm a leader, I want to protect my citizens. I want to protect my people. I'm not going to be playing politics with a deadly virus. I'm going to be like, you know what, Mr. President, whatever you need right now, we're going to put all of our differences aside for the better and protection of this country. So what do you need us to do? What do you need us to happen? We're going to back you up. But that's not what happened. And we can compare that. We can compare that to what took place on September 12th of 2001 when we were attacked. There was no left, there was no right, there was no skin color, there was no nationality. We were all Americans. I remember that day, and it still hurts me to this day because I was actually across the Hudson and I saw those buildings on fire with my own eyes, and I saw them come down with my own eyes. I didn't just watch it on video. I was there close by, right? And so what I saw from our country was a complete, immense unity that I don't think we'll ever see again, unfortunately, sadly. And so what happens is everybody unanimously was on the same page. We need to go attack. We need to get the people responsible. We need to go after them, and so on and so forth. If this was not done under the shadows of crookedness, that would have been the response from the Democratic Party, and said, you know what, Republicans, you guys want to find out how this happened? You guys want to get to the bottom of this? You want to make sure that this doesn't happen again? I'm on board. Let's do it. But that's not what happened. Every time the Republicans tried to come up and tried to find a solution or a way to investigate, every single Democrat voted no. We are not going to investigate. We're not going to go after the origins. Why?
Well, in my opinion, Carlos, and very well said, everything you just said. I mean, absolutely incredible. Why? Because they are politically embedded in the pockets of the Chicoms. They are in bad, shady deals with the communist China. They have their interests, their own agenda. So that just shows you their hypocrisy. Exactly. Yeah. The money, the monkey dances where the money is. So that's exactly what's happening. They don't care about how they say Americans and their safety and everything. It's all a farce. It's all a clown show. So for them to put the curtains and not to have people see what's going on behind them curtains, all the corruption or the illegalities. I mean, it's blatantly obvious, Carlos, what happened. So, and that's going to lead us actually into the Jarnome Fauci's NIH-funded gain-of-function research. Carlos, what's your opinion, an insight on that?
So, a lot of information came out. I don't remember whose email was hacked, but there were emails that were found where Dr. Fauci, on the title or the header or the subject matter of the email, it says gain-of-function. And so when Senator Rand Paul asks him about it, so it's hysterically. He actually tells Rand Paul, he goes, no, sir, you don't know what you're talking about, even though it says gain-of-function research on there. Now, what's interesting is, based on those gain-of-function research that the NIH funded, he's retiring at the end of this year. And Senator Rand Paul, who's been his biggest critic, has ordered the NIH to not delete one shred of documentation. He wants to see it all, because I guarantee you that if the Republicans take back the House and the Senate, I feel a very, very strong investigation coming down on El Fauci.
Definitely, Carlos. I mean, thankfully, Rand Paul is, it's doing this great initiative to order them to withhold all the documents. I mean, that's exactly what they need to do. It's important for this El Fauci to be accountable for the decisions that he made. I mean, he essentially had more power than Trump back when the pandemic started. And, that shouldn't be like that. For a leftist bureaucrat like him with a special agenda, with his connection with Bill Gates and all the irregularities, he needs to be investigated. He needs to be prosecuted, in my opinion. He needs to serve time for the crimes of humanity and the violation of the Nuremberg Code that he and his team did.
So let me ask you this to wrap up. Final question. Based on the original misinformation and the ties with the emails with Dr. Fauci, was he trying to cover himself, or was he doing all of this on purpose?
I strongly believe that he was doing this to cover himself, Carlos, to kind of like cover his tracks on all this illegality about gain of function, him actually visiting, Wuhan and all those reports. I mean, this goes deep. The rabbit hole goes deep in this, and obviously we'll have to wait until more information comes out. That's why it's imperative for all of us, a new audience, to vote red this December. Obviously we do respect your political opinion, but we do strongly believe, get out there. That way investigations can happen and some people can be held accountable.
Yeah, it's November. The elections are in November.
Correct. Yep. In the primaries and the midterms in November. Correct.
Yep. So guys, I know this was a lot of information, and information is constantly going right in the day and age that we live in. But a lot of this information has already taken place. It's already been written in the history, in the pages of history, right? We can see where we're at. We can see where we came from. Now what we've got to do is look forward and seeing how this can never happen and preventing it from ever happening again, and trying to hold those who misled us accountable, guys. Remember, if you lie to the government, you're in trouble. When the government lies to you, what happens? We got to stop that. We got to change that around.
Mm-hmm.
And part of making that change is changing the people who are either covering for these folks, get them out, and get the people that will hold them accountable in. And if you can't get the people that are accountable in, maybe you should do something and run yourself, because the only way we're going to save this country is if we get people like us to get in there and make the changes that we need to.
Amen, amen. Thank you, Carlos, for that. And with that, fellow patriots of the American Republic, until next time, have a great night. God bless you all, and God bless the United States of America. Stay attentive and stay watchful. Be safe.